Afro Skills Week, the reference for skills and knowledge in Africa. Hello to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once more for joining us this day. It is, of course, the last day, and of course, very important day as we continue to mark the Africa Skills Week. Today is the 10th of December, the year 2022, and we're culminating activities that characterize the Africa Skills Week. And we're starting today's edition with this panel discussion, which focuses on the challenges or opportunities and challenges of entrepreneurship in Africa. We are, of course, going to analyze the problems of entrepreneurial venture and see how we can bring about innovation, practical innovation into the sphere of entrepreneurship. And of course, this will be focused on bringing African solutions to African problems. How can we take entrepreneurship in Africa to another dimension? It should be noted that Africa, like I underlined some days ago, Africa is not just a cradle of humanity, but the continent is also a reservoir, a fertile hub for investment. But then how can we notice this if we do not actually take a feasibility studies to see what is impeding the smooth flow of the entrepreneurial venture, and more especially the vibrant African population? And of course, we want to look at the available opportunities and analyze how we can use these prevailing opportunities already to fast track this entrepreneurial drive, which is core. And that is why, under the auspices of Afro Skills today, we want to discuss detailing the opportunities, the challenges of entrepreneurial drive here in Africa. And of course, coming at a time, we should know that countries like Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, among others, have started actually trading under the African continental free trade area. How can we make this practical and feasible to all African countries? So today, let's together with this great panel discuss the challenges, the opportunities, and see how we can take a practical step forward towards ensuring that entrepreneurship takes another dimension across Africa. Thank you to you all participants for being there with us. We pray that you have a good moment, and of course, take this moment to learn and to widen your horizons, understanding the continent Africa, its opportunities. Thank you so much. And of course, without delay, let us introduce to you the panel for this day. And I'm joined this day by great gentlemen from Ghana, and of course, also Germany. And with delight, I'll be going to Ghana. In the first place, meeting Mr. Salifu Ali. He's joining his capacity as Executive Director for Africa Center for Development and Social Innovation. Hello to you, Mr. Salifu. It's a pleasure having you this day on the platform Africa Skills Week. You are most welcome.
Hi, Clarice. Thank you so much. I'm grateful one more time to be joining you on such an important, topic for us to deliberate. And I'm hoping that we'll have a fruitful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. The goal is to have a fruitful deliberation that will bring out a positive impact to all across the continent. Why not across the globe? We are going to stay in Ghana this time around, meeting Mr. Richard Ayikum.
Avec un autre panéliste, Monsieur Richard Agieko, qui est le président directeur général d'une société au Ghana. Bonjour, Monsieur Richard Agieko. Il nous rejoindra dans les prochaines minutes. Nous allons également vous présenter Monsieur Alexander Owolabi.
Hello to you, sir. He's joining us from Germany. Thank you for joining us this day and accepting to share your viewpoints on the challenges and opportunities of entrepreneurship in Africa. You are welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Clarice. Definitely awesome to be here again. Yeah, and I look forward to an interesting, inspiring discussion.
Je suis très honorée d'être là aujourd'hui.
Underline that this day or in this platform, we are going to dwell on key issues which include the constraints to entrepreneurship in
Aujourd'hui,
Africa,
nous
that is
allons nous
culture and
pencher
social
sur
barriers, business
les
environment
contraintes
and so on and
et
so
les
forth. We're
barrières
also going to
sociales
dwell on
qui
the
sont
difficulties of financing
un frein
African entrepreneurship and prospects. And of
au
course, look at
développement de
the
l'entrepreneuriat en
necessary
Afrique, mais nous
reforms
allons également
for
parler des
their
défis
promotion of
dans leur
entrepreneurship.
généralité à
And lastly, we
l'entrepreneuriat
are
en
going to
Afrique.
dwell on the area of opportunity and promotion
Et
for
plus
African
profondément,
entrepreneurship.
nous
And
parlerons
dear
également des
participants,
opportunités
just a reminder that in the
de
course of
l'entrepreneuriat
today's
en
session, if you
Afrique.
have any worry, any
Alors,
doubt, any question,
merci
you can
d'être
just drop
avec
it
nous. Si
in the
vous avez
chat
une question,
room
chers
so that and
participants,
of course do
nous
remember to tag
serons
the speaker you want to answer your
ravis de
question
les
so
recevoir
that
dans le
we
chat
can go smoothly and of
de
course have a
cette
fruitful and
réunion
productive discussion
et
as
interagir
well. Of
avec
course,
vous dans
the
la
most
mesure du
criteria, let
possible.
me start with you, Mr. Salifou Ali. Before looking at the
Alors,
constraints
nous
to
allons dans le vif
entrepreneurship in
du
Africa,
sujet
and of
et
course,
nous
for today
commençons
we are
avec
looking at
vous,
key challenges and
Monsieur
opportunities. But
Salifou,
then I don't want us to dwell more on
qui
the
avait
challenges
de
since we are
l'expérience dans
talking
le
as a
domaine de
and written thing.
l'entrepreneuriat
But
en
then
Afrique.
let's first of all look at the
Je ne voudrais pas
atmosphere of
revenir sur ce
doing
qui a
business
déjà
and
été dit,
entrepreneurship in
mais
Africa.
je voudrais
Is
vous
it
poser cette
favorable or not?
question.
There we are
Est-ce que
going
le
to enter
climat
to look at the
des
constraints.
Africains est favorable à l'entrepreneuriat?
Thank you once more, Clarice.
Merci une fois de plus,
As I
Clarisse.
said earlier, we're looking to a wonderful discussion, and I'm grateful that Alexander is able to join. I hope Richard will join along the line.
C'est que cet
To start
échange
off,
soit beaucoup
you
plus
know, before you can talk about the opportunities for
le-
entrepreneurship in Africa,
vous
you need to
savez,
sit with
les
the characteristics of
opportunités
Africa, and then
de
within it, you're able to
l'investissement en
seek
Afrique
out,
sont
the
variées.
areas that we
Nous
can have
devons cibler
opportunities.
en tant
And
qu'entrepreneurs
from records that Africa
des domaines
the world
d'activité dans
has the
lesquels
most youthful
nous
population.
devons nous lancer en
And
tant
this alone
qu'entrepreneurs.
is a big capital for Africa.
Et
Because
cela,
the
c'est
youth are the
déjà
ones who are
un
energetic,
avantage
who are able to go
considérable
about, who
pour
have the
l'Afrique en termes
enthusiasm,
de capital.
who are zealous to want to
Et
explore their
vous savez, la
environment. Now
population
that
est
is
assez
fine.
jeune et
But Africa
elle
is
est
also
très,
endowed
très,
with a
très,
lot of natural resources. I don't want to recount them
elle
here.
est
We
très
know them already.
dynamique, mais
Again,
également,
that's
elle est
another
pleine de
great
courage
strength
et
for
de zèle.
Africa. Now, the population alone serves as a market. Today we have
La population à elle seule
sometime
représente
in
une
2020.
part de
The
marché
whole of
assez
Africa's population
importante.
has been estimated at what 1.3 billion.
Et en
1.3 billion. Now, this
2022 à
1.3 billion
2020,
population
la
is able
population
to give us
africaine
an
a été
estimated market of what
estimée à
3.4
1,3
trillion dollars. So there's
milliard
a
d'habitants
huge opportunity for Africa. Now, what is
sur
missing
une
is how to be
population
able to take advantage of these
mondiale
opportunities. Again,
de
policy is very important
1,7
in this respect.
trillion
Because as
d'habitants.
we've been saying, if there's no conscious effort to turn around these opportunities to
Et
make
nous
them
ne
our reality,
faisons pas
they
des
will exist
efforts
in space for nothing.
conscients et
Now, how does
constants
it happen if we
afin
don't take the
de
conscious effort to say that
satisfaire à
the
cette
huge
population,
youthful population that we have, which
cette
represent about the
population
1.3
jeune
million market and can
qui
generate beyond
représente
3 trillion
en moyenne
value
1,3
for Africa. How do we tap
million
into that,
de
couple with the natural resources that
clients
we have?
potentiels.
Now,
Comment
Africa
est-ce
has
que
come
nous
together
faisons
from
pour les
one of the
satisfaire?
largest economic growth.
La
We're able to
solution
share
est que le
opportunities
continent
amongst
africain se
ourselves.
réunisse, que les
These
nations
things would
africaines se
continue
réunissent
to
afin de
exist
former
unpaid
un
for in
bloc,
this space
afin de
if
former un groupe qui
policy does not
répondra à cette
consciously,
demande
encourage where
grandissante.
people are able to
Les
take
politiques
advantage.
devraient
So for
se
me, this
réveiller
is the
et
context in
prendre
which
des
we should
mesures
be,
adaptées
discussing the
afin de
opportunities of
répondre
Africa.
à ces nouveaux
The
besoins,
critical
afin
miss is the
également
consciousness
de
to take
subvenir
advantage of what we
aux
have
besoins
and
et de
turn it
répondre
around
à
for our
cette
good. I
grande
think that that's where
demande.
we should be focusing
Je
more of our
pense que
efforts.
pour le moment,
I'll
nous
pause here
devons
for now
nous
and then maybe come
pencher
back
de
later
plus
to
en
the
plus
topic.
sur
Thank you.
cet aspect de la population.
Also
Merci.
underline it, of course, it's always imperative that we should not only
Oui,
focus on the
Nous
challenges,
avons
and of course, let's
souligné
look at
le fait
already available opportunities and
que,
see how we
que
can
nous ayons des
start from
défis
there with
de
regards to
l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. Mais
entrepreneurship
maintenant,
and
penchons-nous
of
sur
course into
les
even. Let's
opportunités
come to you, Mr.
plus
Owolobi.
tard
Let's
de
start
l'entrepreneuriat en
with the
Afrique.
first term for today, yeah, term which is
Pour
dwelling
aujourd'hui,
on the strengths of entrepreneurship
nous
from
allons nous
cultural
pencher
and social barrier,
sur les
business
contraintes
environment. What is your
et
own
les
perspective
barrières
when you hear
à
entrepreneurship and then you hear
l'entrepreneuriat
the cultural,
en
social,
Afrique.
and of course the business environment in Africa? Is it
Alors,
a
nous allons nous
positive or
pencher
a
déjà sur les
contract of
contraintes
entrepreneurship?
culturelles, mais également ces contraintes financières
Thanks, Clarisse, for
qui
the
sont
question, and
enfants
also
en
let's
l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique.
intro with some numbers
Monsieur
from
Alexander
Mr. D.
Olabi.
So, if you talk about the constraints of entrepreneurship
Merci
in Africa, I mean, you made some
pour votre
suggestions
question.
already, so you have this. You could call it
Vous avez
cultural,
déjà
social, business, technical.
décrit également les contraintes
Yeah,
de
we
faire
can say about
des
it.
contraintes
You have
à l'entrepreneuriat en
opportunities,
Afrique.
obviously the most persistent and perhaps annoying one, which could literally be which could have been easily
Bien
fixed, is
évidemment,
the infrastructural constraint, which is most basically led through led through bad governance of the whole African continent. So, but yeah, of course, we don't want to focus too much here on things we can't solve because that's
bien
a little
évidemment, nous ne voulons pas
the other things,
mettre l'accent
which is
uniquement sur les
a little bit
contraintes
more structural
qui sont liées à
constraints, which is
l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. Nous avons parlé de contraintes financières, mais également il y a des contraintes culturelles. Laissez-moi vous l'expliquer autrement.
perhaps before you have General Motors and maybe
Prenons un exemple aux
AG
États-Unis.
in insurance, but then in Nigeria,
Avant
for example, in
d'obtenir
African context,
votre
you don't really have much of these big companies. So maybe we have Dangote and all this stuff. So what does that bring actually?
voiture,
These big
vous
companies,
avez une
they have this
assurance à laquelle il faut
effect
souscrire.
that okay, you have a lot
Mais
of people
nous avons
in
d'autres
there to work,
fortunes en
do
Afrique,
their 5 to
d'autres
10 years
compagnies
of
en
service
Afrique
at
qui
these companies.
font
With
des
that,
Dangote,
they learn a lot from the
procèdent
systems, from the structure. They learn a
différemment.
little more about accounting, learn what you call the unit price of thing, technical
Ils
stuff like gross margins that you will need to be
produisent à grande
improving.
échelle.
So the
Et
advantage of this is being having a place to start from. If these people now eventually leave these big companies and goes into smaller companies and build smaller companies, so
il
they
s'agit pour nous, sur le
some technical
continent,
skills along with them,
grosses compagnies telles que
literally be
Dangote,
like a
à l'instar de
catalyze their
la
actions in
production
this
de ciment par
subsequent
unité.
endeavors. So this
Nous
is
ne
probably one of
pouvons
the
pas avoir la même
apart from the
approche
government,
qu'aux
this is probably
États-Unis dans
also
l'industrie de l'automobile
the
ou
big constraint that we have in
de
Africa, that you don't
de
really a
l'assurance.
lot of learning grants for young people, for entrepreneurs. And to say that
Nous
our
n'avons pas une
educational system,
forme de
it's
plateforme pour
maybe calling it a failure,
encourager
might be a
l'initiative
little bit too harsh,
entrepreneuriale
but
comme à
it's
l'étranger,
definitely
mais
not on the right
tout
path. So if
tout
you look
simplement,
outside
si nous
of Africa, you have
regardons
the advantage that in students
à
already in the
l'extérieur du
university,
continent, le
each
système
university have
éducatif
more or
est
less
tout à
multiple
fait
startups
différent.
on their
Nous
own.
l'avons déjà
So
évoqué,
they are
vous
like
l'avez
research
évoqué précédemment,
research subjects
les
that they
jours
don't learn
d'avant,
from this research.
mais
They
il
don't
s'agit également de pouvoir
have to
mettre
learn this,
l'accent
and the
sur
university actually
ces
back it up at the startup, and they say
nouvelles
this is applicable
techniques
there. So what does that
d'éducation
give you? This
à
again
implémenter sur
enables
notre
young people
continent.
already from a young age, from the university, exposure to all these
Que
kind of
nous
activities,
allons
and from there on,
implémenter ces
it make
techniques
it definitely easier
et les faire
so
assimiler à nos
to build on it, to have
jeunes
this domino
générations.
effect on the society.
Comment est-ce que nous le faisons pour les appliquer à notre continent dans ce
Owolobi,
contexte
for
actuel?
introductory statement regarding our topic for discussion, opportunities and challenges of doing business in
Merci,
Africa. And it
Monsieur
should be noted like the
Alexander
two
Owolabi.
main speakers have already
Nous avons
underlined that
parlé des contraintes
Africa is a
culturelles, c'est
reservoir
vrai,
for
et
investment.
financières, mais vous avez
Africa
mis
is a
l'accent sur les
blessing for
contraintes
investment, but then with a growing
éducationnelles.
population and of course
Nous
an
allons
increasing
continuer
domestic
également dans cet
turnover, but
axe
then what
en
are the
précisant que nous
major
sommes une
challenges
population grandissante sur le
technicals
continent
before going to the
africain.
in ensuring that there is
Mais comment est-ce que nous prenons le taureau par les cornes et que nous avançons dans le domaine de l'entrepreneuriat en tant qu'Africains? Nous savons que les Africains ne se reposent pas uniquement sur des tierces personnes, des parties prenantes, mais également qu'ils peuvent prendre des mesures internes afin de réagir. Nous avons, par exemple, lors de la période COVID, assisté à des efforts qui ont été mis en place sur le continent. Ma question est de savoir comment est-ce qu'en tant que continent, nous serons mieux face à un problème de crise mondiale comme celui que nous avons observé en 2020.
Social and business barrier. Do you think the way we do things, our norms or our laws are not making entrepreneurship favorable, especially when they talk culture? I think about women, and of
Comment
course,
est-ce que vous concevez les contraintes culturelles et économiques? Est-ce que vous pensez qu'elles sont normalisées et qu'elles favorisent l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique, selon votre point de vue?
Just to their home, it's already a setback for them to want to be economically viable and see how they can opt the process of entrepreneurship across the continent Africa.
Thank you very much, Clarice.
Votre avis sur la question des contraintes culturelles et financières. Est-ce que vous pensez que l'Afrique, ça rime parfaitement à cette globalisation et ce changement? Merci Clarisse pour cette question. Ce que je remarque, c'est que nous avons également un gros souci au niveau de l'intégration de la femme dans le domaine de l'entrepreneuriat. Et nous ne pouvons pas avancer dans cet obstacle, car vous ne pouvez pas avancer avec un seul pied. Et je pense que nous pouvons également commencer par penser l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. La formation que vous recevez, vos équipes avec lesquelles vous travaillez, les marchés sur lesquels vous opérez, cela détermine pour vous et pour votre équipe le meilleur moyen de pouvoir vous lancer. Et lorsque vous commencez en tant que femme, il ne s'agit pas seulement d'entrer dans le domaine de l'entrepreneuriat en tant que femme, mais c'est également un exemple pour les uns et les autres de commencer à petite échelle et avancer. Et cela est également un exemple, non seulement pour les femmes, mais également pour la famille. Nous pouvons également regarder en termes de socialisation et de pouvoir prendre plus en considération l'intégration de la femme dans l'entrepreneuriat. Et je pense que jusqu'ici, les mesures pour faciliter l'accès de la femme à l'entrepreneuriat ne sont pas encore très élaborées. Nous avons remarqué également que des filles ont été défavorisées dans l'activisme de certains genres. Nous avons privilégié l'éducation des jeunes personnes au détriment de celle des jeunes filles qu'on considère encore au moins juste la place à la culture. Et je pense que nous devons commencer également par éduquer ces jeunes filles et leur ouvrir des opportunités, ouvrir leur imagination à peut-être se lancer dans l'entrepreneuriat plus tard. Il ne s'agit pas qu'une histoire de genre masculin, mais de vraiment les encourager à s'y lancer. Je pense que cela serait également une grande aide dans le domaine culturel en Afrique. Merci, Monsieur Salifou.
And the goal is to
N'oublions
see
pas que nous devons
the
équilibrer
African
justement la participation des genres
entrepreneurship or
masculins et féminins
entrepreneurial
dans
drive is
l'entrepreneuriat
a balance
en
and
Afrique.
having the goal of fast tracking or facelifting the economic trajectory of the African
Il
continent.
s'agit en premier lieu de pouvoir
We are looking at the challenges of
entraîner une croissance
doing,
économique
business
et
in
non de
Africa or
favoriser un
the
genre
unfavourable
au-dessus d'un autre.
entrepreneurial drive across the continent Africa. Coming back to you, Mr. Ola.
Pour revenir à vous, Monsieur
We underlined
Owolo,
some of the challenges, though we said we
continuons,
shouldn't
suivons.
dwell on the challenges, but then when we identify the challenges, let's look at the way forward. I quite remember
Nous allons nous
of
pencher sur les
Uganda.
défis
You
et
were
lorsque nous
clearly
aurons
saying
identifié ces
Africa
défis,
has
nous
a lot
pourrons déterminer
has
quelles sont les
potential that can
opportunités.
take the continent to the fore, that can
Vous
develop the
savez,
continent
le
socially,
continent regorge de tellement de
economically, and he said
ressources
something. There is
politiques,
this,
sociales, culturelles,
for real
économiques, afin de pouvoir
practicality, there
avancer
is
et se
supposed to be the
hisser sur un
meeting
rang
of the minds. So he says when the African
international. Mais
minds
cela nous
meet,
demande
then we can
de
come as one
pouvoir
and bring, of course, African
réunir
solutions to African
toutes
problems.
ces
And that's why some pundits always like, we should not take a solution that is feasible in this country and try to implement it in another country without actually evaluating or analyzing. So I want us to dwell now on this aspect of the financing of entrepreneurial venture in Africa. That is a lapse, that is a setback. So what is the way forward? If we keep on dwelling on the setback, we'll talk without, but then let's look at what can the stakeholders, especially even the African governments, do to finance these business ideas, which are very feasible and have the potentiality of transforming the continent Africa.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Talking just about the problem is it's a not a winning strategy. But interestingly, actually, to be an entrepreneur, what does that mean in actual positive side? The best entrepreneurs succeeded because they find a way removing unwinding friction in the markets. So all these constraints and all these challenges that we see, that we talked about, and wherever you say, okay, this is a challenge, and most you say the government is at fault, the educational system is at fault. So all these challenges and all these constraints at the end lays bare an open opportunity. So can you come up as a young person, as young or old, we don't really care, man or woman, can you come up as a person and find a way to tackle just one major constraint, one major challenge, and find a way to unwind it into a solution? This will help all of us up, and at the end, that is what entrepreneurship should be all about. Yeah, and like Mr. Salou already said, we have big numbers in population. Yeah, so Africa is as a whole 1.3. Yeah, you said 1.3 billion. So in comparison, India is I think India should be like 1.2 billion, and China around us 1.4 billion. So there's power in this number, and the only difference is the other people, China and India, they are capitalizing on these numbers. They're turning it into substance. They turn it into economic movement, and that is the difference. So I try to use examples a lot. Yeah. So another example I would use, I'll try not to use too much of examples, but I figure out it makes matters a little bit more relative or when discussing. So you had actually one of the probably one of the worst car makers on earth, which is Tata Motors. I wouldn't probably my words are a little bit harsh, but you will get a point there at the end. So Tata Motors, it's a car company from India. Yeah, they make like the cheapest car ever. You could get a brand new car of Tata Motors probably for $1,000, and with this car you will never get a license to drive this car in any industrialized company, in any industrialized country. Yeah, so never. So but what happens, Tata Motors make these cars $1,000 for a brand new car out of the factory. Yeah, but hey, you are in India with 1.3 billion people. So even if you just capture 1% of the whole market, yeah. So just sell 1% of the people in India this $1,000 in car. So you can imagine how much revenue you got. So what happened after a couple of years of selling the worst car ever on planet Earth for probably $1,000 or less, they emerged huge revenue, huge bank accounts, that they ended up actually buying one of the best car in the world, yeah, which is the Jaguar and Land Rover. So if you're driving a Jaguar, which I mean, to get a brand new Jaguar, you would probably be paying somewhere around $100,000 or more, depending on age and style. So Tata Motors, producing the worst car ever, yeah, gathered enough revenue to actually now buy one of the most sophisticated and expensive and luxurious. I mean, the English royal family drives Jaguar. Yeah, it's like almost a must. So Tata Motors own Jaguar. So you just have to picture that in mind. So at the end, numbers, it's very important. Yeah, and we can, if you materialize these numbers, you could do amazing things. Yeah, and following on that, at the end, I think as an entrepreneur, what you just have to realize is, you don't. I mean, you could have big ideas, but you don't always have to start big. And this is also probably a good example with the Tata Motors. Yeah. So if you start small enough, you just have to, like, most important thing is not what you do, it's actually that you are doing something. You just have to start. Yeah. So just to take Make It To Our Surprises, our company, as an example. So what we do is we deliver, maybe to put it in this perspective. In the beginning, when I was trying to have an idea for a company to create, actually, I was thinking massive. I was like, renewable energies, doing crazy stuff. I mean, and each of these cases, you probably need at least, I don't know, 10 million or even more dollars to start. So I was back in Africa, I was in Nigeria talking, and then we were discussing, and then this discussion, which I was pitched to, Make It To Our Surprises, which is literally, you find somebody that wants to surprise his loved ones, wife, daughter, mother, and then they contact this company, they wrap up the package. So mostly just like a cake, couple of jewelry, this and that, some flowers, and then they get a musical, one or two people on trumpet, on the drums, and then they surprise the person that needs to be surprised at home or at his place of work. Yeah. So me coming from a technical background, thinking, I mean, dude, I was taking renewable energies, I was taking machinery, I was taking turbines. Now, somebody pitching me an idea, say, oh, you could just go around places and play drums and supply cakes, and that should be the next big thing. So I did, like, come on, you kidding me? So I went back in, I was like, yeah, whatever. So it was actually in the flight back to Germany, and then I was like, wait a second, this could work, this could sink in, because what we actually done is not, these are multiple layers. So the company starts with, okay, the initial business layer of actually giving out presents and making the videos and making everybody happy. So you get money for the present being delivered. But the most interesting part was actually all this, the delivery was everything is filmed. So we're actually creating materials. Yeah, we actually created content. So now Make It To Our Surprises, it does surprises in first level, but at the end, it's actually a content creation. And the sky is in the limit. And the best part of it, we didn't need $10 million to start. I think we start with very, very, not so much of the money. Yeah. So I have a great idea, but the most important thing is to start. And don't think too much of a big capital. find a problem you can solve, and find the easiest way, the cheapest way to actually push it on and start.
Indeed, of course, entrepreneurship is about solving an economic problem, and it can be at any level. Listening to you, Mr. Wallaby, I will summarize that from your perspective. It means we need to change narratives as far as entrepreneurship. We shouldn't just focus our attention on one. We should explore the available opportunities like you have underlined, of course, and see how we can be able to harness what is there and make good use of the resources. Now, coming back to you, Mr. Salifu Ali, we are going to dwell still on the aspect of financing, which is a problem to entrepreneurial venture in Africa, particularly. Then I want us to shift not just from having the money, but then let's look at the projects that are actually being financed in Africa. Do you think these are the projects that we're supposed to be channeling the resources to now, or we are missing the target? Because sometimes you can have the resources, but if you go about it the wrong way, the end products will not actually be fruitful or positive. So what do you think are those physical areas of projects which you think can be financed to ensure that there is this entrepreneurship, that it is positive in Africa? Because from my own perspective, when we talk entrepreneurship, we are looking at African economic integration, and we're looking at how Africa can trade within itself. But then these are some of the challenges. How can Africa trade within itself? Do we have the goods, the products, and the services that we really need to ensure the smooth trading? And those are some of the questions we're answering today. So according to you, where can we channel these finances?
So two key things. When I advise businesses, usually I don't like to hammer so much the issue of lack of finance. Yes, it's a challenge. I mean, we can't rule that out. But here's the thing. Now, if you produce a product or a service and it doesn't sell, it means that you didn't do the most fundamental or basic thing, which is market research, market surveillance. Now, the product or the service that would sell in the market is the one that is actually needed. In Alexander's what you call illustration, he realized that, okay, I mean, using his IT background and putting together surprise birthday parties for people was actually a need. And so he added his IT, background to it, and then off he went. Now, what most startups, especially, beginner entrepreneurs don't do is that they just follow the passion. Oh, I have interest in this. I have some competencies or skills in this. And then they jump up to it. No, you need to start from what? Research. Research and development is very key. It's missing. Now, if you don't do that, you find that you have a product on your hands, which you have spent so much time, resources, and money into, and then nobody is buying it. Nobody is buying it because they don't need it. We said that entrepreneurs solve today's problems, and they position themselves for future challenges. That's what entrepreneurs do. They don't just go, start producing things. So if you have the right products that you have researched into, which the market actually needs and there are clients for, anybody you pitch to and you make this case to them would come into finance. So you pitch to a financier or prospective financial institution, and they don't express interest in your product or your project. You have to go back to the drawing board. You should realize that what you are pitching is not what the financier sees as going to solve our basic day-to-day challenges or problems. And so they will not put their money into what would not sell. So I think, again, if we start from the point of researching on what actually the market needs, or who is it that needs this particular service, at what point do they need it, in what quality do they need it, in what volumes do they need it, at what time, then the finances would come along the line. If that is not done, I mean, I'm not sure you can travel far.
nous savons que je suis persuadée que les ressources financières suivront. Si un
Study the market
entrepreneur
before you
prend le
invest money, and of course while waiting for a positive return, like you said, entrepreneurship is all about risk taking. Of course, be ready for future challenges, like you've underlined. Just to acknowledge our participants here with us, telling them that they are part of the program. So with any worry, they can leave their questions in the chat room so that we can respond to their preoccupations, and we continue to talk in a capacity as the marking the first edition of the Africa Skills Week. Of course, we want to look at the importance of entrepreneurship in the continent. We have identified the challenges. Now, the next term or the next theme that we're going to look at, the point which is very imperative once it comes to Africa and the fact that the act of doing business. Let's look at this point, which was summarized as the necessary reforms for the promotion of entrepreneurship. Now, Mr. Awolabi, we're talking about reforms. Here, do you think the reforms are from the government or individuals engaging the entrepreneurial drive, or the civil society, or maybe other institutions that are linked to the perspective of seeing the African economy very buoyant? And of course, so where do you think the bulk of those reforms need to come from, and what has been holding the stakeholders behind from actually implementing?
When we talk about reforms, obviously, I mean, this is a quite clear word. So reforms can mostly, an organized reform can only come from the government, so to say. Everything else is an entrepreneurship. So yeah, so reform, I would say the probably most important reforms the government could do is on two grounds. First, my opinion, a mandate on companies. I mean, we don't have that much companies, but still we still have multi-billion-dollar oligarchs, so to say, companies in oligopoly in Africa. So just to use Nigeria as an example, since I'm native Nigerian, I'm more familiar with the terms. Yeah. So you have all these companies like Dangote, you have companies like MTN, you have all of these oil and gas companies. So also also in Ghana these days. So there must be a mandate, and kudos to a company like Dangote, which is doing it already. And so they're like transitioning already starting from food, and now Dangote is building one of the biggest refinery in probably, let's just say in Africa, probably a noticeable size in the world's terms. Yeah. So they're transitioning across multiple industries, multiple sectors, and this can only be of advantage to us. And only a company like Dangote of such capital can actually execute this kind of task. So there should be a mandate generally for companies up from certain market cap, from a certain market value, the amount they have to be doing, putting into every year into research and development. Yeah, there must be a certain amount they must be putting out for training. I'm not just talking about putting people in for internship without paying them. You actually have to pay them. Yeah, but actually a real training program that also give people that without a higher educational background a better chance of actually being participating in the economy. So there has to be this mandate, for on the company side. So from a certain value, you have to do R&D, you have to do training, and maybe even we can even break down R&D into, okay, there's some research and stuff, but actual investment in startups, actual building of a parallel sector. There must be an active role of companies which are gaining enough from African soils in actually also building Africa for the next generation. So that's one part that I think is necessary, reforms on companies. The second part, which is also more or less which is even more important in my opinion, is on our higher educations. So, I mean, the way the higher education is run these days is not the best way to do it. Like I said, all out of Africa, you have the situation that all these universities, they could literally fund themselves because they actually have viable companies parallel to the academic academic curriculum. So there must be a mandate. In as much this university still gets money, collect money from the federal government, there must be a mandate and an expectation what these universities, what each courses, what each department should be delivering in terms of actual materialization of all the things, all these beautiful things they're doing in physics, in IT, in chemistry, in biology. Yeah. So there must be a push in this aspect and a delivery. So of course the government have to bring in the investment, but there must be accountability and result must be shown. So those will be the two, in my opinion, on companies and on higher institution, which is mostly universities or polytechnics.
Very imperative. Let's have your own opinion on this, Mr. Salifu Ali.
Yes, I was itching to make a point. I was gonna touch on, the kind of education that we have, or if you like, the curricula that our universities would run. Typically, I think it's our own doing. And again, I go back to policy. If the policy is right, the end results too will be what? Will be right, because then we'll be guided so that if we are, going astray, we know that, okay, at this point we deviated from what the policy dictates that we should do. Now, the narrative you hear is two main sectors: public sector and private sector. Public sector, private sector, public sector, private sector. Now, to the neglect of what? Entrepreneurship, which mostly because of the structure of the whole of what? The continent, you find a chunk of what? The entrepreneurs within the informal what? Sector. And our education train us to come out and get what? Employment, not to create employment. Entrepreneurship, creating, solving the day-to-day what? Problems. So again, from curricula and policy in terms of what? Our education, we have it all wrong starting off. Because if the mindset is that, oh, go to school so that you come out and get employed, not to create employment. You come out and you find that the employment is not there, and you have not been given the basic tools to be able to create, then you find that you are redundant. You are hanging. You don't know where to go. And this creates despondency. Before we know it, is blowing into strife and all that, all the vices that you can talk about. So the policy perspective, again, is a conscious thing, it's deliberate. We decide it, we envision where we want Africa to go, and then we put in the necessary policies to shape decade by decade, and then we get there. We will not just get up one day and then, arrive. It doesn't happen that way. And if we are not conscious about it and we're leaving it a chance to happen, it never happens. What only happens is what you have taken deliberate steps to cause into being, which we seems to be a bit, reluctant on. So I think that's the issue.
We are going to dwell more on that, but before accentuating on this very aspect of reforms, which is very important, we have to identify the areas where we need to actually make some changes to see that the entrepreneurial drive takes another dimension. Like you said, it should enable students to be more of people, young people, to be job creators and not job seekers, to be able to solve an economic problem. It's true that everybody cannot be an entrepreneur, but then of course it is still very important that we can encourage the aspect of entrepreneurship among young people that will help solve some of the problems. We are talking about African young people dying in the Mediterranean because they want to make themselves across to the other world that has been termed the I call it heaven, but then I think being economically viable will help to mitigate some of this problem, and of course solve the problem of radicalization among the young people in Africa. And with on this note, so we're going to welcome our third speaker. That is Mr. Richard. I underlined already. He's the Executive Director, Expert Skills Development, Accra, Ghana. He's joining us right now. You're welcome, sir, and thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Sorry, in fact, I have an internet connectivity problem, so I couldn't join you earlier. Currently, I'm even using my phone. I've improvised.
Important when we find ourselves in a situation like that, it's always good to look for a solution, and that's why we are talking today of African
All right.
entrepreneurship.
So,
How can we lead
thank
from
you.
dwelling on the challenges of entrepreneurship, or the act of doing business in Africa, to making already taking advantage of the available opportunities? Mr. Richard?
Okay, so taking advantage of the available resources, what can we do? If I got your question right.
Absolutely. We were talking about being practical and feasible in whatever thing we are doing. Are we going to just highlight the problems of entrepreneurship without looking at the solutions, the practical solutions that can be implemented from now until Africa reaches the area where, or the top where we want the continent to be? So what is feasible for us to do now, especially the direct stakeholders?
Of course, we need to look at the practical solutions that we need to deploy as a continent in order to be able to unearth the potential from our youth. And pragmatically, we need to look at the business structure of entrepreneurs. We need to look at how organizations compose or consist of their companies. We need to look at the knowledge base of entrepreneurs. It is not just an issue of being fantasized or having the zeal, the enthusiasm to do business. We need to look at what you are bringing on board, what we are investing into our young ones, right from the basics, the requirements that they will need. Like I heard earlier, in making sure that we instill the right reforms from our universities, right from the kindergarten, even through our junior high schools. We need to ensure that these basic things are introduced so that you don't have to change an adult. You don't have to mend an adult who has already formed his opinions and aspirations. But right from the onset, we'll know that, okay, people that are growing up already have this entrepreneurial skills and drive, so that stakeholders will be able to tap into those potentials right from the onset, and then groom those that have expertise, various subjects and skills. And I think it is something that all of us, all stakeholders, need to be interested in, because there are elsewhere, there are companies who go to institutions, identify the skill set, and try to plug in those individuals right from the time of their vocational and elementary education. and it brings a lot of fruitfulness in whatever we do. But in our case, we wait, and then even to some extent, we think entrepreneurship is for dropouts, it's for people who don't have jobs. But we should ensure that right from the basics, we are able to instill, we put into place this formality. In fact, I heard Ali mentioning it, the curriculum. We ensure that entrepreneurship is right imbibed there, and then factor in those key expectations so that whilst they grow up, you'll be able to plug in the Dangotes right from the beginning. We'll be able to plug in all those potentials so that we'll be able to move the African drive forward. If we do that, we'll make sure that in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years, we'll be able to, if not catch up with the European business and market, we'll right have businesses that are able to challenge them in terms of competitiveness. Yeah, this is what I think right from the onset we need to do in order to change some of these structures.
Indeed, positive change is what Africa needs, defining a clear path for entrepreneurship. Before you joined, we were already on the aspect of reforms, Mr. Richard. And of course, I want us to look at when they talk reforms, I look at reforms in every dimension and every sphere. So, Dr. Mr. Wolobia already underlined on the education sector, which Mr. Salifu reiterated on. I want us to look at this aspect of currency. We are talking about doing business in Africa. Do you think that the fact that Africa does not have a legal tender or money, a local money that can facilitate business in Africa is another reason why there is stagnation or there is a slow pace in the rate of doing business in Africa? And if yes, how can we ensure that Africa has
Okay,
that
thank you.
all the issues of currency
Yeah.
in Africa?
Okay, thank you. I believe it plays a major role because we are in a continent where almost all countries have their legal tender, and this legal tender is only limited within their borders, within their boundaries. So, for instance, in Ghana, we use CD. If you cross the border to Togo, you cannot use the CD again. You need to change your CD. It becomes valueless, useless. Yeah. So definitely the issue of having a common currency is very, very vital. I know the AU, the West ECOWAS have in fact tried several times to push this agenda of Africa, and for that matter, ECOWAS having a common currency, which will facilitate trade. The last time I checked, I've been informed it has gone far. We are looking at a year or within 5 years whether this reform can happen because of the after agenda, which many experts believe that it is the game changer if to have a common currency within our sub-region. So in fact, it is key. It is something that needs to be given priority. And to me, if you ask me, I will say it is not negotiable because it's impeding our progress in terms of markets. You see, we have so many potentials, so many products and services that we need to trade among ourselves. But because of these challenges, we are not able to do. So it is something that stakeholders, and for that matter, in this case, we will appeal to our head of states, those in the AU Secretariat, those in the ECOWAS Secretariat, and then even the East Africa sub-regions. We should give it a priority because over 6 billion trade potentials within the African, within our sub, we can't let it go waste. So it is something that we should actually start right from within regulatory reforms. So amend some of our acts within our countries, which will ensure that we are able to accept the global and for that matter, the African agreed currency in our sovereign. Change, do reforms, ensure that they are compliance. We set up secretariats if possible, and then also ensure that we draw up a roadmap. And I believe institutions like AfriSkills would engaging stakeholders using the media and using our platforms to be able to push in this agenda so that our entrepreneurs will get the benefit. Else we'll end up rhetoric as usual. We'll talk and talk and talk, and yet still the very tool that will ensure that businesses brings productivity to our people be able to achieve. So that one is non-negotiable. Getting the common currency to facilitate trade. It is very, very important, especially in the time when we have accepted after as one of the key
which is very imperative. Doing business and having a common legal tender is imperative in making it very flexible and of course faster to realize it. We know of the latest development in Ghana that the government decided that they will be trading not using the dollar, but then they'll be using gold. And I think that is a milestone already for the government of Ghana, trying to give value to its own currency. And just some few days ago, the Ghanaian city recorded an increase in value and of course the exchange rate, which is very commendable. Let's continue with this reformer in the line aspect of currency. Mr. Olabi, Mr. Richard talked about the initiatives of ECOWAS. Now my issue is, if we want to trade between Africa, what if now that we have regional, sub-regional bodies and we see them taking initiatives, we want to fast track trade among us, like ECOWAS trading with one single currency with other ECOWAS countries. What about countries that do not belong to the ECOWAS? And then when we are going to ECOWAS, we see them wanting to trade with another currency. When we are going out to SADC and then the East African, why not think as one, and of course, bring all of these countries under the African Union, trying to get a common currency that is very familiar with every country and which will ease business. We talked about the after, which Mr. Richard said is a game changer. And of course, economists have said it's a game changer. But then the fact that there is no free movement already and there is no common legal tender, it's already an impediment. It's not an easy journey, but then how can we harmonize ourselves under one currency to fast track trade and development? Because when we talk about doing business, if we cannot give value to the legal tender we are using, then I think the proceeds will not be commendable, and not that, of course, will make us proud that we have taken a step ahead. What's your opinion on this, Mr. Owolabi?
Well, I mean, in a free market, the more friction you can remove from the market, the better for all the participants overall. Of course, in the initial initiation, there will always be some certain imbalance. There will be people that gain a little bit more, and there will always be winners and losers. But on the long run, it has shown multiple times in the history that is of great advantage. So the situation between ECOWAS or AU, of course, in my opinion, I think most people would prefer to have a AU solution once and for all. And then the argument for the other party, it's okay, what is likely to be achieved in a more faster pace? So now this is a question. You want to take speed rather than durability. So I would say it's better to go for durability and just go all on once for the African Union solution. What's to look out for is just to make sure, okay, we've seen people that initiated this stuff. I mean, the AU is a recent example with the Euro being the legal standard in the European countries. Yeah, till today it's still it's a little bit more on a solid ground, but there's still questions and doubts to us. So most important will be to make sure, okay, that we are not repeating the same mistakes that you have made, and say, okay, let's learn from their mistakes. And it's of course definitely important, if we have a currency, that this currency is actually based on African resources and not a currency based again on some certain French colonial history, or even the US dollars. I will be a little bit skeptical about that. So the technical background, it's actually a very, very, very important part. But yeah, on the overall, this is definitely a friction, but because each time you have to change from one currency to another, that means there's a middleman there that you have to give out an additional cost. So it's always an additional cost, and it's friction. So you remove this cost, and for the overall, for everybody, it will be of great advantage. And for finally bringing Africa, it's the right decision in the right path to bringing Africa to a one economy.
Indeed, for the African meaning, this just shows that there is much work to be done by the AU Secretariat. And of course, Mr. Salif Wali, when we're talking about reforms, there are many reforms that actually have to happen in Africa for us to see that business is actually flourishing. We're talking about the AU, we're talking about the currency, but then there's this one aspect. Sometimes people will say, African governments do not have this strong political will. But then let's look at what is hidden behind that. We're looking at some of the economic parts that the continent, that governments have signed, especially or the signs with their former colonial past, but till today we're still feeling the effect. And that's some pundits always feel like this is one reason why African leaders cannot actually take a strong decision as far as maybe implementing the single currency, of course, promoting what will actually take Africa, because the goal is to see that Africa positions itself economically. We always say that when a continent is, or a country is economically buoyant, some troubles are reduced, some crises are reduced. It's true we cannot avoid them. Let's analyze some of these economic paths that are still holding us behind, especially stopping the African leaders from taking decisions and standing by the decision.
Okay, let me make my take on the common currency issue before I come to the political will of African leaders. I have some good news, which is that we tried ECO, it didn't work. Some of the other, blogs, SADC and the rest have also tried certain things, and we're still, here. Just within this year, I think PAPS, I don't know if you have followed PAPS. PAPS is the Pan-African, payment and settlement system. I think it has been introduced, and it was inaugurated within the year, on the coming on board of after, so that we can be able to make payments within Africa seamlessly. It is an online, system of what payment, e-commerce, because the physical integration is still ongoing. That has not concluded yet. But yet, after has kicked in and trade has to start. The phase of goods and services has taken off successfully. And so the African countries that have ratified have started trading among themselves. And so you needed an opportunity where payments can be made freely and seamlessly, so that I can sit in Ghana here without carrying the bulk of money across the border to Nigeria or Togo to go and pay for goods and services. And so in the wisdom of AU, PAPS came on board, which is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. So it is on right now. And I think gradually we'll get to integrate the rest of it. But the biggest challenge has been our borders, and also our languages of official, business. Take you, Clarisse, for instance, you have Anglophone and Francophone Cameroon, which alone is is a big issue. Now, good for you, I'm sure that because it's one country, you're able to speak both. So you can transact business both in French, sorry, and in English. Now, Togo, where they don't speak English, and Ghana, where we don't speak French. If you have to transact business, it means that you need middlemen, which Alexander talked about in his earlier presentation. And this middlemen will come at cost, because they have to interpret, which is a skill that they are providing service to you. So all of these things create a problem, which is why I said I have good news. The PAPS comes to to help, take away these challenges, so that we are still able to to trade amongst ourselves. Now, coming back to the question that you asked recently, which is the political will to let things happen. I think that Africa is still grappling with that challenge. Yes, we celebrate our political independence every anniversary, but the real economic independence is still I think we have a long way to go on that. See, you still have certain African countries whose central banks or reserves are in their colonial masters vaults. Okay, so that they tell you that, okay, implement this monetary or fiscal policy or that. You can only access this much of your reserve. You can't access that much. I don't want to mention names of countries here, but today, on African continent, we still have central bank reserves of some of our compatriots sitting in the central banks of some colonial masters. So that tie, that umbilical cord has not been completely cut off, so that they dictate to you somehow certain initiatives to take. And when certain policies are coming and you kick against them, then you have to pay for them economically. So I think, again, earlier there was a very important point that Alexander made. Who said that we have to keep going to our colonial masters to take their blueprints and implement them, verbatim, before we can develop? No. Development is not cut in stone. It's not a straight-jacketed thing, so that if I don't implement it exactly as Nigeria has done, I will never get to develop. Forgetting that the circumstances of Nigeria are not the same as Ghana. The resource endowment of Nigeria may not be the same as, they may be similar, but they are never the same. The human resource capacity of Nigeria may not be the same as Ghana. So you only pick the aspects that suit your situation and not copy blindly. And because of our colonial antecedents, our apron strings are still tied, unfortunately, to the colonial master. And this makes it very difficult for some of our leaders to take some of the bold decisions that, would catalyze us into the next level of our economic development. And I think that that's one of the banes we still have to contend with. And again, the socialization, the nationalist consciousness to understand that this is our own, and then we can make it happen. And together we are in the boat, so that, bit by bit, everybody contributes their quota for us to get it happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Salifu Alia. Of course, gradually we are going to reach the top. Africa is going to reach where it wants to be. And of course, like you said, there is need to dissociate from those parts that are acting as impediment to the transformation of our continent, Africa. You may have something to say regarding the political will of African governments, Mr. Alexander Owolabia. What is your own perspective regarding this political will? And of course, what are some, apart from the political will, what are some of the lapses from the side of the government that you think are impediment to trade across Africa or within Africa or in Africa?
Where should I start?
Anywhere.
Well, at the end, I think until we can have a fair and free election in Africa, where politicians and where politicians are actually held accountable, and they know they will be held accountable for their actions. Yeah, we can't move forward. We can't move forward in Africa, unfortunately. So we must find a way, probably as one of the first, to find a way to digitalize our voting system. Yeah, because you still have a situation right now in Africa, right now in Nigeria, for example, that during voting, it's not surprising if you have gunmen, so hired merchants supervising voting centers and making sure you vote in a certain way or the other. So until we can actually digitalize this and remove all frictions from this system on the political platform, I really don't. I'm not that optimistic. Let's put it that way. What I'm optimistic about, though, is the role of bigger organizations like the ECOWAS and the African Union. Yeah. Again, we must make sure we're not copying one-to-one, like with Ms. Ali has already repeated again. So you have the situation right now in Europe. I don't want to make it too much examples, but again, examples helps in simplifying matters. So you have the situation right now that the European Union is more or less like a technocrat system that's literally all over, that is based structurally, hierarchy-wise, over the country representatives and countries' governance of the European Union. So they make certain regulations and certain requirements that these countries, these member states, have to implement. So it has its advantages and it has a lot of disadvantages. So you still want to respect the free will of each country, and you shouldn't have a non-voted party literally dictating how a country should be run. That is definitely wrong, and it's what is currently happening in Europe, and that's why the whole situation of the European Union is still under a great threat. So could we create an African Union, a ECOWAS, but most likely African Union, with all its branches, African Development Bank and this and that, that could find a way in channeling through to each countries and being a source of innovation, source of development for each countries, without necessarily intriguing itself, putting himself too much in the local systems of each country. So just be the good part, take the act on the good part, and leave the domestic jargons to the countries' governors by themselves. I think that will be a way forward for us all.
Indeed, there is always a way forward. Mr. Richard, if you're still there, let's dwell more on the perhaps underlined by Mr. Salifu. He talked about those digital means. Doesn't mean we are going to just ignore having this physical currency and of course focus more on the digital currency or means of transactions. We know, yeah, the world is evolving and the world is digital. So how can we educate the business atmosphere or the environment to be able to help them get acquainted with this digital currency that will facilitate doing business in Africa. Because when we talk about entrepreneurship, one of the panelists earlier on mentioned about education, formal and informal education, and of course we also know people to some people who like they acquire informal education and they're implanted in the entrepreneurial venture. Don't you think that relying just on the digital sector for now will still be an impediment? So those who cannot easily adapt, yeah, it's an option, but is that what we want now? How can we cut the financial ties with maybe for a former colonial past and ensure that business flourishes across Africa?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I want to give you a very straight answer to this, but I will explain. I think business has evolved, and for that matter, entrepreneurs must also understand that we are no more in the dark ages. Technology has come to stay, and so the better we embrace these innovations in terms of introduction of new payment systems, the better for us all. I believe definitely there are people and within our continents where access to increases. But hey, we can't fold our arms and just watch the space. So I will recommend and suggest that we need to come on board. For instance, Ghana, we have one of the payment platforms, PayPal, and then Ghana Pay, which is within the public sector, facilitating payment of all payments within government agencies. And it has brought a lot of improvements. The GIFMIS system, whereby management of information within the governments and the government agencies are being run, has brought a lot of improvement. It has limited the bureaucracy for that matter, which was a very big challenge in terms of records, data management, improvement of services. Now, with the gift mix, budgets are being prepared on time. You can easily monitor payments, expenditure, and then income, grants, and other things. So my point is that
Mon avis est le suivant.
we need to embrace this new
En
payment
tant
stream.
qu'entrepreneur et dans l'entrepreneuriat, nous devons embrasser cette nouvelle façon de travailler. Cette digitalisation de la monnaie devrait d'être acceptée et d'être utilisée enfin dans l'entrepreneuriat. Ces nouvelles technologies devraient être maîtrisées et également dans cette panoplie de nouveaux systèmes de paiement, nous sommes capables de reconnaître que cela vient alléger, vient faciliter les transactions et de créer des plateformes qui vont faciliter les échanges dans l'entrepreneuriat. Lorsque nous avons lancé ce concours entreprise, vous avez des startups, des entreprises qui sont allées, qui sont avant-gardistes et qui ont proposé ces moyens de paiement révolutionnaires.
the power of their power in their currency, and even there is a fear that okay,
Et également, vous savez, lorsque
we might lose
vous maîtrisez votre monnaie et que vous avez le, vous avez la main mise dessus, cela vous donne du pouvoir. Et je pense que nous devons tous aller tendre vers cela afin d'avoir évidemment la main mise sur nos monnaies.
Taking good use of every available opportunity, and of course, in
Oui, merci. Nous allons prendre bien évidemment note de tout cela, mais profiter de toutes les opportunités qui s'offrent à nous.
Panel discussion which focuses on the challenges and opportunities of doing
Et
business in
nous
Africa.
avons pu
Last area is
discuter
with
sur
opportunities and promotion for entrepreneurship
les
in
défis
Africa.
et les opportunités de l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique.
Giving way for
Avant de
next panel,
conclure
we still focus on
et de
business.
pouvoir continuer dans le domaine des affaires en Afrique, nous allons poursuivre avec Monsieur Salifou.
From a personal perspective and what you think is feasible are the areas of opportunity of promotion for African.
D'un point de vue personnel, quel est pour vous, à votre avis, les opportunités d'affaires en Afrique auxquelles nous pourrons solutionner?
More entrepreneurs to drive
Vous savez, en Afrique, d'un point de vue personnel, nous avons besoin de plus en plus d'entrepreneurs, de mon point de vue. Et cela également, nous avons la consommation de produits intérieurs bruts en Afrique d'un tiers. Cela représente une part assez importante du continent africain. Nous avons besoin de plus en plus d'entrepreneurs sur le continent.
The standard or the universal $1 a day mark. And so we need to look at that. Again, entrepreneurship promotes.
Nous devons également nous pencher vers la monnaie digitale.
Going back to the example of Alexander when in the flight, it dawned on him, hey,
lorsque nous parlons également de la digitalisation, nous avons besoin de plus de technologies nouvelles afin de faciliter la façon dont les échanges se font, de faciliter également les affaires dans l'Afrique.
The developed countries that we often tout and want to emulate, they have blueprints, some of them spanning centuries, and
vous savez, les pays développés dans lesquels nous avons, ils ont leur
given their status at the time and the new developments that are coming, they go and update and they keep course. And then today they are
bien
we keep referencing them. If we have that in our body, politics and
directeur de faire des affaires et nous devons nous y arriver. Je crois que nous devons en faire autant en Afrique.
The next big bank, but it's waiting for us to what? To tap into it and let
Vous
it
savez, la pleine façon de faire les affaires avec cette digitalisation de la monnaie n'attend que nous pour pouvoir nous y arriver et de prendre également des actions nécessaires. Nous espérons également que ces personnes, ces décideurs dans les gouvernements qui nous écoutent prendront des mesures adéquates afin de faciliter la pratique de l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. Merci.
Let's look at we earlier said that
Monsieur
Africa
Kalifo,
6 billion trade potential, if I got it correct, and then we're looking also at the manpower available. So how can African governments
nous
use
allons
this
parler de la main-d'œuvre et également des ressources en Afrique. Si, à votre avis, quels sont les que le continent africain vient de pouvoir
Change ideas.
amener l'entrepreneuriat à un autre niveau?
And being a place where people can then come back and hopefully learn it through into learn 18 or two, and then work to a betterment and development of the whole continent. Because at the end, especially once you leave
Nous avons besoin de tout cela pour travailler au développement du continent africain.
Nigerian anymore. Yeah, you're an African, and it is what it is, and we should be proud of it. We want to be proud of it. We should be proud of it, and we should enjoy every moment of it. So, numbers is everything. So you said about it. We said it already multiple times. Africa has a population of 1.3 billion. Yeah. So again, of course, now we're counting everybody.
L'Afrique a une
population, but we have the advantage that the bulk majority from the age of 16 to the age of, let's just call it 60, it's probably at least 70%, and those are the active partakers in the economy. So you can just imagine you have 1 billion people. Try to sell a thing that even costs one.
Vous avez imaginé une population d'1,3 milliard de personnes en Afrique qui voudraient, par exemple,
that you're selling for 100, and that is the multiples. That's how it goes. So we have this youthful population, and it won't be youthful for too long. And you have already the situation in China that actually the age group is more or less old, and actually they have a problem of population declination coming in the next 10 years. So this is our moment. We have to turn these numbers into economic activity, and then once you turn it to economic activity, and the way we should actually start it, is creating an African GDP, creating market within Africa. We shouldn't focus right now on exporting to Europe. So if I were the president of Nigeria, I wouldn't be building a gas pipeline to Germany, to Europe right now, even though there is a market. I will be building a gas pipeline supplying all of Africa, and building the economy in Africa. We have to build an African GDP and turn these numbers into market value. Once the market value is there, everything else.
Nous avons une population d'1,3 milliard d'habitants. Si chacun d'entre eux veut, par exemple, générer $1
security, and we have market creation. This is where I can double my money in the next 12 months. They're going to come. So you could see everybody's in China, not because they like the Chinese policy, not because they like the Chinese government, not because they like the Chinese people. No, it's a simple fact. They're over there, I can double my money within 12 months. So all capital flows over there. So, and that is our goal. And for the government. So for the entrepreneurs, for the young ones, what I would just say is, talking about the challenges and constraints won't bring us anything. So on the other hand, challenges and constraints are friction of markets, and entrepreneurs are created when you actually remove frictions in market. So all the problems that is right now, find a solution for just one problem or for two, and be open for ideas along the way. And it must not even be your idea that actually conquers the end. In as much you have an idea, bring people along. You say alone, you come fast alone. To go far, it's better in group, but be in the right set of groups, because it's going to be disadvantageous again. So find a way, find a problem and solve it. And don't start with the big capital, start with the small capital. And the most important thing is you act and you keep working on it. And to build on yourself, we're in a digital age where instead of listening to music and listen to preaches, listen to podcasts. There are a lot of countless podcasts on YouTube, on Spotify for free. You can listen to them. On Twitter, don't follow the musician of the year, follow the entrepreneur of the year, follow the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, the Dangote, yeah, and learn from them. Get what you need from the market, from the digital age, and help us build Africa to the next level. So once again, thanks for having me, and I hope we continue the discussion and materialization of all these dreams.
Thank you to Mr. Olabi. Indeed, there is need to carefully choose your peer group and, of course, to see how this can impact you. Let's get a concluding words from Mr. Richard regarding our topic for discussion. What should we take home, Mr. Richard? Hello,
Okay.
Mr. Richard.
Entrepreneurship. Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. You can write on.
Hello. Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, so as has been rightly articulated by all the panelists, entrepreneurship is the most sustainable tool for us to drive our continent to a higher level in terms of job creation and also to grow our economy. The good opportunities are there, as has been mentioned. We have the human capital, and interestingly, our very viable, vibrant youth. And currently, our youth are ready to take up business and leadership. So it is an opportunity for us. Again, but for Ukraine and Russia war and the COVID, Africa in most countries are growing the economies. So we don't have stagnant economy as it used to be. Our economies are growing, which is an opportunity for entrepreneurs. We are having a rising middle class. Now, many people are moving from the lower class to the middle class level. Again, when you look at our sub-regions and in Africa, you now have rapid urbanization, which brings on board opportunities for entrepreneurs and business growth. So what we are talking about is very, very important. And the good news is that globally, there are also other opportunities available for entrepreneurs to feed on. The green evolution is there for us. So businesses need to be very strategic. We tailor our businesses to the market trends. So appetite for green and eco-friendly, strategize to be able to take advantage of those opportunities that are coming up.
Okay.
And interestingly, we also have growing from the informal open space to now a formal and organized retail market. For instance, markets and then supermarkets coming on board all across Africa. So if you really do your target market, you'll be able to produce your products and services. You have structured businesses to feed on it. It's only 5% all across our country, all Africa, that have benefited from these online businesses that is sprouting out. It's a great opportunity for Africa entrepreneurs to tap into it. And I believe with this platform, we need to educate our brothers and sisters. we need to encourage each other, and also to take advantage of like Afro skills. We also provide us with incubators, so that we will be able to harness of this. It's not only about the sale, but it's about strategically feeding ourselves into the available opportunities that are available. And I believe with programs like Afro skills, we will be able to champion this and then also give opportunity for our young sisters and entrepreneurship to able to grow our continent together. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope we'll do this again. Thank you.
Of course, Mr. Richard, we will do this again because Afro Skills is intentional about driving skills development in Africa, about being that catalyst that will bring to the fore all the innate abilities of young people in Africa, and of course contribute its own quota to writing a right economic trajectory for the continent Africa. I thank you all, gentlemen, for being there, for the wonderful analysis regarding our topic for discussions. Thank you for gracing the Africa Skills Week with this. We were joined this day by Mr. Salifu Ali, Executive Director, Africa Center for Development and Social Innovation. Also, Mr. Richard Akikuma. He is Executive Director, Expert Skills Development Center, Accra, Ghana. And of course, Mr. Alexander Owolabi, co-founder, Make It Wow Surprises, and Jeperon joining us today from Germany. Thank you to you all for being there, and to the participants. We continue to carry on with the Africa Skills Week. Today is the last day, and of course, we have a lot in stock as the day unfolds. Thank you, and see you shortly as we continue to look at challenges of doing business. This time around, we are going to focus on the African diaspora. Thank you, and I'll see you shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, see ya.
All right, Alexander, see ya.
Yeah, see ya. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye.